All right. It is Earth Day. And if you're a wine lover like me, and I'm sure you are if you're tuning into this show, your thoughts turn to organic wines, biodynamic wines, sustainably farmed wines. Um, but what does all of that mean? What's the difference between organic wine and, say, biodynamic wine, and and even sustainably farmed wines? And are organic wines any better for you, health wise? Do you have less of a hangover? I'm Natalie McLean, editor of Canada's largest wine review site at nataliemclean.com, and we gather here every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern to talk to the most intriguing people in the world of wine. Now, our next guest is going to answer all of those questions for us about organic wine. But before I get into that, in the comments below, just let me know, yes or no, do you think organic wines are better for you? Yes or no? All right, folks, I am going to introduce our guest. The Sipper Club show, Thomas Bachelder. Hello.
Hello, hello. Hi,
Hi.
Natalie.
Hi, how
Long
are
time no
you?
see.
Yes, that's
Long,
right. All
long
right.
day.
Yes, that's true. We had our little test. Okay, and I am just refreshing. I am seeing that people are already on and live. Excellent. And it sounds like you all can hear and see us just fine, which is great. The tech gods are with us tonight. Knock on whatever. So, Thomas, to get us warmed up now, maybe before we dive into that topic of organic wines, can you remember the exact moment when you knew you wanted to make wine?
No, but I when I came home when I got turned 18, I'm 6'5", nearly 6'4" and three quarters, 196 centimeters. So I got a lot of drinking done before I was 18 in Quebec, and not drinking but tasting. And I started bringing wine home to the table for my parents on probably much like you on Sunday nights, and they love that. And from there, I got a home winemaking kit, and so that was probably it. My brother bought it for me, and from there, I became a wine journalist. Not as accomplished as yourself, but I showed promise, and from then I joined the Human Society Wine Tidings La Barrique in Montreal, and went to wine school from there in Burgundy. At the time, there was no Brock University.
Okay.
So I fell right into the Pinot revolution in Burgundy and rediscovered Chardonnay that from many Maine holidays, as Montrealers and Ottawa people will do, they go to Maine. It's the closest. We love our Nova Scotia and our New Brunswick, but Maine's really close. And I've had so much bad Chardonnay down there. Now, caveat: California makes fabulous Chardonnay, but that's not what I was drinking. I was drinking 9.99 Chardonnay, which was pretty goopy. And so when I went to Burgundy, of course, we all like the idea of organic gardens, no pesticides, no herbicides, and no synthetic fertilizers. But in Burgundy, it was really in Burgundy's quality revolution because it was in the early 90s. And at the same time, all the young ones like Pascal Marchand, who later came to be my boss and friend through the Clos Jardin, was they were turning things around, and they have, thousands of years old terroirs. And if they don't have that, they've got nothing. So they were first about protecting the earth and stewarding that land to future generations. After, did it taste better? Was it better for you? It's something we can get to later in the show. But that's where it came
Absolutely.
from, learning to make wine and going to school in Burgundy.
Okay, awesome. And I just want to welcome a lot of people are pouring in the virtual wine bar door here, and Andrea Shapiro and Christian Marcoux, Anne McLean, Carolyn Hetke, Lori Kilmartin, and you folks, as you know, it kind of disappears off the screen after 5 comments, so please post again. I want to know you're here, and if you have any questions for Thomas. Now, one moment before we keep going here. If you are enjoying this conversation or think you'll enjoy it, please take a moment to share this video out. People can still join us now. Let them know why you think they should come along. It's going to be a great conversation. I'm going to be giving shout outs to those who do share and comment. And of course, if you do, we will be giving away a prize next week for those who do share and comment. At the end of this show, I will be letting you know who won 2 bottles of Alamos wines from our last guest, who was on for Malbec Day last week. And of course, you can click to follow, like, share, etc. Okay. And I just want to get back to this. Colleen Kilty was saying no sound. Are you hearing me now, Colleen? Hello, Linda Alexander. Looking forward to learning more on the topic with you both. Lise Gagne says, I remember last year Thomas was pretty funny. Yes, he sets a high bar for himself, doesn't he? And Francis says, hello, Natalie and Thomas. I am not going to attempt your last name, Francis. I don't want to get it wrong. But all right, sound is good. Is the sound even good when I go to the slides, Lise, like when I was talking about the share? I just want to make sure. All right, so let's get back to Thomas. And I'm getting a bit of feedback here. I'm not sure. Thomas, your headphones are plugged in, I think, firmly.
My headphones on.
Okay, good. There's a nice sound. I love that. Are you thirsty, Thomas?
Yes, I'm getting a little thirsty. I'm trying to guess what you have open. We'll see if I guessed right.
Oh, well, I kind of started top of the line because I was pre-tasting last night. And of course, pre-tasting last night, one of your wines became our dinner wine. And that was the Le Grand Reserve Pinot. I'm sure that's not where we want to start, but we want to start with the Pinots, I'll bet.
Yeah. No, but that's what I just popped because I wanted to make sure you got to it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what
and
you
I
just
also popped the Reserve. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. This is a stunning, stunning wine. I mean, is there is there a particular story behind this wine, the Caylis Grand Reserve?
There sure is. That's a great one to start with.
Okay.
So I'm going to remember. So one of the first things is Caylis is 100% organic, and the winemaking is organic. But here's the thing, and this is what I say at any trade show. And I think I saw you at Taste Ontario. I'll probably be seeing you at the Lifford shows, which is our agent, comes to Ottawa. And I tell people right away, Caylis is owned by 12 Quebecers who are just in love with Ontario, in love with Niagara. And I said, we got to do organics. And they said, yeah, but, we're new to this. I said, so don't certify. So my straight line on that is when you don't certify, nobody has to believe you. But it's the truth. And, someday we'll hopefully get around to certifying. But meanwhile, walk the walk and make good wines. It's a scary place, Ontario, in terms of only one thing. Those 2 big lakes have so much humidity. That's not like Burgundy. Burgundy's landlocked, and Oregon has those mountains from the sea. But we're right here. The summer is humid and the fall is humid, and that adds to fungus, right? Now, You can use sulfur and copper. They help, and those are mined minerals that are organic, but you got to watch it. So we've been in the game 8 vintages now, and we're still organic. But, if somebody wants to say to me, look, you want to walk the walk, buddy, certify, I'll say, well, okay, well, you ready to write the check if something goes wrong? What are you going to do? So, that's the main thing is do organic, and then after, fight it out with yourself, whether you certify and with what body.
Because with certification, you're saying if you have a bad year or there's a lot of mildew or rot, you may have to go off organic standards and do something to save the crop?
That's right. One of the things you do is you get a sorting table when you make Pinot Noir. And when things go off, you may have to pick a couple of days earlier before things fall apart. There's an expression in our industry, fall apart. That means the rot advancing. Things are going perfectly, and then the rains come in. There's a hurricane down in Louisiana, and we get the tail end of that, and it's enough. The Pinot, the Cabernet grapes are tight and hard and a month away, and Pinot is just blossoming and getting lovely. And that's when you say, get the sorting table out. Let's get some temporary workers. We need 6 people on the table at all time. And you can make beautiful wine in those years. So I would argue that you never have to resort to that stuff, right? Okay. And we had a wet summer last year, as you did in Ottawa, and Kalis didn't spray anything nasty,
Okay. Well, Linda Alexander and Mark Lay are both asking the same question, which is a question I had intended to ask you, but they're on the ball here. They're asking, what's the difference between organic and biodynamic wines?
That is a great question. And by fluke, I was reading a new book that the guy really addressed it well. Michael Steenbergen, what's his name?
Yes, know him. He writes for Slate. York, right? Yeah.
Right, he works for Slate. And he said very simply, of course, I'll just say it from my own experience, but I can't help but by influence him because I read it this morning lying in bed thinking about Earth Day. And the organics and biodynamics are the same from an organic viticulture point of view and from a winemaking point of view. Okay, it's non-intervention. You can use mine minerals, like I said earlier, like sulfur and copper, to spray, put them into water and spray, and they help protect. Any rainfall, they get washed right out. Now, one thing I want to say I'm going to forget, so this is not about biodynamics, but whether you're in organics or biodynamics, the copper is a metal. It's a heavy metal, and you can eventually get toxicity in your soil. So even with organics and biodynamics, we are watching copper like a hawk. We have virgin soils over here compared to Burgundy. So I learned from the Burgundians, they actually look at the load they're putting on a vineyard every year, and they try to skip treatments. Imagine that you're organic, you're using organic materials, and you're trying to skip treatments. It's like not taking your full antibiotic dose when you've been sick. But we do that to try to always use the least intervention on the land we can. So from there, biodynamics, on that base of all that stuff we talk about, and if anybody's confused about what I said, please write Natalie and I'll clear it up and I'll say it better. But biodynamics now does something else, which it really responds to the phases of the moon and the planets, and it looks at what time of the year, how can the equinoxes not affect us? How can the solstices not affect us? My God, animals howl at the moon. How can we not be affected? We're just not aware of it. So Rudolf Steiner, who thought up all this back in 1924 and brought this program to people in Germany and Poland who were suffering crops from too much artificial fertilization. Fertilization is as big a problem as anything, right? It's not just the pesticides you spray, right? And fungicides you spray. So fungicides is against rot. Pesticides is against bugs, and herbicides is against grass and weeds. You don't spray herbicides like Cadis doesn't. You have to hand hoe or machine hoe it. It's a lot of work, and it makes the price of viticulture go up. But biodynamics goes one step further beyond the phases of the moon and everything, and uses several preparations, all named 500 and something, that believe that when you use a homeopathic amount of something, it sends a signal that does a greater good. So, a crazy one, this is not biodynamic, but a crazy great example that I love is Oregon farmers sitting in their fields, seeing hundreds of birds coming in, killing a couple, and burning them and putting their ashes on the end posts. And while that seems ridiculous, and I reacted like that back in the early 2000s as ridiculous, but birds are super smart, and if they see that their friends are burnt and they can smell that, so you either believe that this stuff works or don't.
Right. Sounds like a Game of Thrones thing. Put them outside the city on the pillar walls or whatever. But I'm sure
that's it. But I think the thing is this: if this is too confusing, if people disagree with this, here's the thing: all biodynamic practitioners, and of which I've only been in passing with the Clos Jardin, I've been organic all the time, but I got to tell you, all biodynamic practitioners are excellent organic viticulturists as well.
Right.
because they have to be paranoid and they have to be on the money. And if they're trying to skip a sulfur treatment or skip a copper treatment, all legal and organic, then and replace it with a homeopathic treatment, they better be on their game,
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very admirable thing, and one that's probably better to do if your bank account's in the black, but also if you have a property of long standing, like Nicolas Joly does in the Coulée de Serron, and he was able to figure it out based on a background of success already. So those are just my cautionary words. And
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And Beverly Aslason is finding this discussion very interesting. Kimberly Inkstatter says, does organic winemaking also mean natural fermentation, no added yeast or no cultured yeasts?
Yeah, it does. And apparently now they've got some that are admissible in certain certifiers. So there's not only one certifying body, there's many. And you can choose them based on how proud you are of how stringent they are, or who will let you get away with stuff, right? And getting away with stuff, what does that mean? It all depends on what lens you're looking through. But certainly I've always used wild yeast not because I want to be organic, which I do, but because wild yeast grows on the grapes in the vineyard in the year of that production. So if it's a year that's headed to 14% alcohol based on the sugar in the grapes, or a year that's headed to 11.5, those yeast grew in that year too. And there's a lot of them. Yeah, beaucoup de souches. There's lots of different clones of the yeast, and they're all different and they add complexity. And almost for sure, when I smell a ferment, I can't say always in the bottle, Natalie, because there's so many other things like the length of the oak aging program and how long it was in bottle before, to get more perfume in the bottle before it was released and all that stuff. But basically, though, in a ferment, I can smell it when there's a simplicity to added yeast. They can be fantastic and they make your life easier. They produce less volatility. They can be more reliable, but not always fermenters. So it's like a drug for winemakers. If they can use a yeast from a package to get a desired flavor profile.
Right.
But by mixing a bunch of package yeast, you do not get the complexity of wild yeast, not because there's not as many different individuals, but because all those individuals have been selected and bred to be perfect. And I'm not knocking yeast, because when I have used it in the past, if you have a year that is 14.5 potential, in other words, enough sugar in the grapes to give you 14.5, like in Oregon, for instance, it's happened in Niagara too, it's happened in Burgundy. The problem is towards the end of ferment, as the alcohol, I don't know if people realize this, but let me take one step backwards. When you have sugar in a grape, the yeast transform that into alcohol. We know that. But also the byproducts are CO2. And, so you get to a point where as the alcohol raises in a wine, in a vat, and the sugar goes down, the alcohol starts to be toxic to the yeast. And so when you get closer to 13.5, 14, the yeast go, I'm done, I'm out of here. And so the last few grams of sugar can be very hard to ferment. And that's where winemakers are totally organic will buy an organic yeast and just finish off the ferment. Because if they don't, other bad things would start to happen, like volatility or the vinegar flavor rising. And so in places that are routinely hot, like California, parts of California, people are worried about this. And so they will finish their ferments, even if they start wild. And that's part of this whole cool climate thing. It's not organics. Niagara's hot, Prince Edward County's hot, because we regularly make wines between 12 and 13.2, naturally with no chaptalization. These cool climate wines are not only digestible by humans, but they finish their ferments naturally with wild ferment because the yeasts aren't as stressed. That was a long story. I'm sorry, but
That's okay.
It's a great question.
We've got so many coming in, and they're about to fall off the screen. Linda Alexander asks, do organic or biodynamic wines, are they better for those with allergies or gluten-free or anything? Health-wise, how does organic wine tie into health? Are they any better for us? What about hangovers?
Right. So, the first thing I want to say is one of the aha moments for me is that sulfur and copper, which are used to spray organic vineyards, they're also used to spray conventional vineyards. They're cheaper to use than the big nasty chemicals out there. But those, it's funny because also when you're in a winery, if you add something, which I'm getting around to your question, you can add copper and sulfur. Sulfur, we've all heard of sulfites in wine, and copper is only used in the winery at the last minute, and it's such infinitesimal. We're talking about really homeopathic doses. What that does is help you if a wine is really reduced and smells like burnt rubber and garlic, and nobody likes that, right? You try to avoid that. There's other ways of managing that in your fermentation, and that's not what today's about. But here's something that almost smacks of either creationism or else very enlightened Darwinism, which is, why is it that copper and sulfur work in the field and also work in the winery? Like, who thought that up? Why is it that the fermentation gives off CO2, which protects the wine, and then when you put it in barrel, there's a malolactic fermentation, which also gives off CO2, thus protecting the wine. There's naturally sulfur that's occurring in wines, which protects the wine. Winemakers in Bordeaux, I think it was, figured out 3 centuries ago that if they burnt a sulfur wick, a wick that was dipped in sulfur in the barrel stayed fresh. And then when the wine went in, that was their way of adding sulfur to the wine. So because biodynamics and organics have stringent levels of total sulfur you can use and free sulfur, organic winemakers are very aware of that and try to keep it low. So it's not because the fruit is better, unless somebody proves something about pesticides, but it's not like, so far nobody's heard that pesticides in a wine have hurt a human being. Maybe because everything drops out, right? Everything drops out with the lees in the wine, and you get this clear wine. That's the whole thing about wine, why it's so pure. Why people in Europe used to drink wine instead of water when the water supplies were doubtful, because wine purifies itself. But generally, there will be less sulfites in organic and especially biodynamic wine. Also in natural wine, but that's a whole other big...
That's another show. I just wanted to welcome Deb Podrigal, who's here from BC. Mark Lay is in Toronto, or just outside of Toronto. He has organic wines in his cellar in preparation for tonight. And he has found a few different ones. I'm environmentally conscious, but organic wine hasn't been the main focus of mine when buying wine. Should it be?
Well, I'll tell you something, but I love just answering straight. You know what? I think you get more... Power is a bad word. I don't like that word, but I think you get more power in life. Somebody come up with a word for us. I think you get more power from telling the truth, right? Uh-huh. So for instance, we're talking about 2 projects tonight as well as organic. We're talking about Caylus, which is organic but not certified, and Bachelder was what's called a micronégoce in France, and Bachelder buys in grapes. So when I was out of school, I said, in Burgundy, I'm always going to be organic. Well, when I got to be somebody to buy grapes, if I can't get organic grapes, but I can get a good Premier Cru in Burgundy or a great single vineyard in Niagara, I got to take it because I got to make good wine. So the answer to that is, non-organic wines can taste great, because even in situations where people are more conventional, there's great viticulturists who are conventional who want to protect their crops and their investment. So even in that situation, those people are looking to not spray and not put on product so that they can save money and have a vineyard that turns a profit. Because believe me, profitability is the best sustainability, right? You have to make a buck or else you can't go on. And so that's where I was tested when I started Bachelder, because organic grapes were much more available in Burgundy and Oregon than they are here in Niagara. And that's because it's harder here. So if you grow organic grapes, you bloody well keep them for yourself. So it doesn't matter whether your name is Thomas Bachelder or Natalie McLean or Romany Conti. If you're working in Niagara and you don't own the vineyards, you have to kind of just be happy with the best vineyards you can get and then encourage them to become organic. And it'll happen slowly. We know that this world can't continue at the rate it's going, and not only about plastic water bottles, right, which we hear a lot about today, it's about everything. We have to find really smart ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. So absolutely.
Organics isn't just like, it's not just a thing for hippies anymore, or ex-hippies. It's a thing for everybody. Someday everything will have to be organic. And that's not like my fervent belief. It is, but it's just the way it's going to have to go if we're going to have this many people on the planet, right?
Yeah, yeah, especially enjoying good wine.
Yes.
Happy people on the planet. Gregory Hughes is here. Enologize. Malcolm is here. Malcolm Lamont. Linda Alexander, no guilt if you tell the truth. Francis, will organic wines cellar as well as their non-organic counterparts? And I just also want to call out to Paul Hollander has joined us and a few other people who have slipped off the screen. But how about cellaring? Do organic wines cellar well, Thomas?
Well, I think Peter Gamble, who's done so many good things right now, he's starting VQA out in Nova Scotia and doing Benjamin Bridge and, Lightfoot Wolfville. But here he does Stratus and he's done a bunch of things like Ravine. And one of the things he said to me is, Thomas, you can't be a lover of terroir and not be a lover of vintages. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you have to accept the role of the vintages, and consumers, enlightened consumers, should accept that a wine is 13.5 one year and 11.5 another. It leaves winemakers more ability to just deliver the real thing, right? So I think, but what trumps almost everything is old vines and terroir. When you have a great single vineyard, in France it's called Premier Cru or Grand Cru Burgundy, we have a great single vineyard with older vines. What they deliver is something that the consumers don't hear about much, but it's called dry extract. En français, extrait sec. And
dry extract, okay.
Dry extract is, and Rudolf Steiner did a lot of this, but so do normal scientists. When you boil down a wine and the only thing that's left is the dry extract, it's like the soul of the wine, the stuff that came from the grape skins that makes a wine have more minerality or more tension. Aside from acidity, it's what you extracted that gave the flavor. And you can go look that up online, folks, while you're listening. Anyway, but as it pertains to wine, the dry extract and the soul of the wine, the year it was grown in, all that stuff adds up together. So it's tannin, alcohol. Some wines hold on acidity, some wines hold on tannin, some wines hold on alcohol, and age and improve. You need all three, but the best thing is a great site with older vines, perfectly farmed. Believe me, it's a simple recipe, easy to say, hard to find. Where do you find old vines in Prince Edward County?
Right.
For instance, and they're making great wines. But so all that, just let me go on one more second. Old vines, what they do is they buffer out. They buffer out. En français, c'est l'effet tampon. It buffers out the hot years. So old vines with deep roots, in hot years, those deep roots get water and they still make a good, fresh wine. In wet years, when the young vines with their surface roots are just soaking up the rain and making bloated grapes that don't taste like anything, the old vines are like, okay, by the time you get down to my roots, the water won't be as much of an effect. So I'm not saying old vines are the only good wines. What I'm saying is usually the wines that will age the best is a well-balanced year with wines that have lots of soul and dry extract. Macerated well, but not too much. Just everything in balance. Those are the ageable wines,
Wow, that's fantastic. I love that concept of dry extract. I can almost apply it to humans at the end of our life as we become shriveled and wizened and dried up. But it's kind of who we are, and our personalities have concentrated. Anyway, probably not the right analogy.
Well, one thing, Navi, and I mean, we all say I need a drink sometime. But aside from that time, I would like to talk about times when you're somewhere. And whether it's a wine bar in New York City or Ottawa or Vancouver, downtown Portland, or in a vineyard in the Loire or somewhere, and you just take a glass of wine and it beyond the alcohol, beyond the flavor, it's almost nourishing.
Yes, like a plant that comes back to life.
Yeah, that moment is the soul, what the French call énergie, what scientists call dry extract, terroir, minerality, all that comes together. And that is the nourishing aspect of wine, really it is. And ultimately, I'm a great, great lover of red wines, but the reason the planet, invests more and the red wines go to higher, except for the Montrachet and great Rieslings, the reason it goes more to red is reds tend to have more dry extract. And hence more ageability.
Okay. And more substance or something.
Yeah. And I mean, whites spend 2-3 hours in the press. Reds spend 3 weeks on their skins and then an hour in the press.
Wow.
So
they've been to school longer.
They've been to school
They
longer.
went to graduate degrees or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, can I tell you one thing
Yes,
about the Kalis Grand Reserve? You asked
of
a question, I
course.
didn't
Yes,
respond.
please go
So
back to that.
Kalis does,
Yes,
yeah, you hold it.
yes,
Kalis
I will.
does, they have, we have, I'm not an investor, but I've been with Kalis since day one, and Kalis, made it possible for Bachelder to exist because I was able to not take a salary from Bachelder, something Mary doesn't like too much because she's worked for us for 8 years, but we're trying to build something small and cool. And, but Kalis, as I said, there are 12 Quebecers invested in Niagara, in Beamsville and Jordan. And one of the old Le Clos Jordan plots was called La Petite Colline,
Colleen, yeah.
and that's in Jordan. And that's blended with their home site in Beamsville to do this. Now, can you see this here?
Yes.
I'm not very good at
And
this.
I held it up too.
So that's Lake Ontario. You hold it up, Natalie. That's Lake Ontario. And the lighter blue is shallow, and the deeper blue is the deeper part of Lake Ontario. And the Y of Kalis is where the domain is. So that's why they did it, because they're so enthralled to be the first Quebecers, like over the moon about Niagara. And I said, what do you want? They said, well, you have full rain. We started back in 10. And they said, well, we want a tradition, a reserve, and the Grand Reserve. Your choice. Each one is a blend of the two vineyards, Beamsville and Jordan, about 11 clicks apart. And as you get to the Grand Reserve, you get more to the old Le Clos Jordan site. That's 70% of Neudorf, which used to be called La Petite Colline. And it is like chewing on wet stones. And we go to the best part of that vineyard, and then we take the best barrels, Kelly and I, the associate winemaker, Kelly Mason, and we always look for something chiseled that doesn't give it up right away. This wine does not give it up on the first day.
No. This is, right.
Tradition does, but you can still age tradition. So it's tradition, reserve, and Grand Reserve. And the reserve is always, which I also opened because you opened it.
Yes.
Is the reserve is more punchy and a little more obvious, but still luscious and lovely. And tradition, what's a good way of saying? Tradition. Yeah, that's the one you see in the LCBO and the SAC, the SAQ most of the time.
Reserve, yes, absolutely. And I'm just going to take a moment, Thomas, to welcome Eric Sykes, who's been chiming in here. And Lise Gagne loves our yeast discussion. Folks, if you are enjoying this, please take a moment to share this video now. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to our guests. But also it invites those you know who might want to jump in and watch this video with you and comment along. We have such fun here. I'm going to be giving shout outs to anyone who is sharing the video. And of course, if you share and comment, you could win a prize that we will draw for next week. At the end of this session, of course, we will be drawing for someone who shared the video last week for a couple of bottles of Alamos. And Lori Kilpatrick is saying, I love your wines, Thomas. So we've got a fan club going here.
Oh.
And,
hey, Natalie, can I say something about yeast for Eric?
Sure.
So here's the thing. Wild yeasts are everywhere in nature, right? And when you start a new winery, you're worried that the wild yeast won't come because it's a crystal clean building, but they do come, okay? And I've seen this a couple of times in startups in Oregon and here. But this is where you have to rely on the French, because French is champignon. So in French, yeast, la levure is a champignon. In English, it's a fungus. So, but we don't think of a yeast as a fungus. We think of it as yeast. But whatever it is, when you apply too many fungicides on your plant to kill rot, you killed the wild yeast. Oh. So that is why organics is hand in hand with wild yeast. But let me tell you, that's the great news. So you're not killing the wild yeast. The bad news is, wow, you can get some bad funk with organics. You got to really know what you're doing, especially in Ontario. Ontario is one of the best future places to make great Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, amongst other things. But it's also one of the most precarious, right? We have this thin isthmus of land that's called Niagara and a thin band called Lake Erie North Shore and another thin band called Prince Edward County, and they're all in contact with water. So we're extremely continental, and we're almost like maritime as well. When Europeans used to come to visit me at the Clos Jordan or come now to visit us at Kalis or Bachelder, if they've come right from the airport, and they've been sleeping because they're tired on an overnight flight or whatever, and they wake up in Beamsville and they look at it, Lake Ontario, they think it's the ocean. Oh, you're on the East Coast. Well, yeah, it's a little more centered than the East Coast, and that's Lake Ontario. You can't see across it. You can see Toronto off the side, but that way you can't see across it. So that water has a profound effect. So I like to think when we harvest Burgundian varietals, we are very much like Burgundy. We're at the end of when these varietals will ripen, September, without rotting. But once you push through those rains, then you become maritime like Bordeaux, because the water in Lake Ontario stays warm. Lake Ontario never freezes for a long time. And that's another show, the Niagara Beach and the whole thing about the lakes. It's a fascinating subject. It's taken me years to sort of half understand,
Wow, that's fantastic. I want to give a shout out to the people who've been sharing our video already. There are 17 of them, so I'll just name a few because some also have their settings to private mode. But thank you to Linda Alexander, Lise Giray, Gagne, Andrea Shapiro, Laurie Kilmartin, Malcolm Lamont, Eric Sykes, The Wine Lover's Kitchen, Wine Wonders of the World, and Bachelder Wines. Imagine, they've shared it.
How about that? Well, it wasn't me. Don't blame me.
And there's others, but I can only see the ones who have their settings set to public versus private. Anyway, okay, so that's fantastic. Thomas, we should taste through these wines a bit more. So we've
What would you
mentioned
like to do next?
Okay, well, we've mentioned all three Pinots. Did you want to say anything more about the Pinots or?
Of Calis? No, the Calis Pinots is just, wild yeast,
Yeah.
minimal intervention, everything by gravity, and then 16 months of barrel age. And
Okay.
I'm going to say something about barrels and Chardonnay, but I'll try not to say it now. But what I'll say about barrels and Pinot, because you buy a cheap wine out there and it's oak chips, and it's for the effect of the oakiness. Like winemakers at a very high level, like $20 and above, they do not want oakiness. They want silkiness and suave. What's the word? Suaveness or suavity?
Sure.
Whatever. Yeah, that's it.
Just go with it.
They want terroir in their wines, and the best way to kill terroir is to have too much oak. So the idea that oak is a vessel that oxygenates a wine. Think of tawny port in oak for 2 years, 10 years, or 20 or 30, and vintage port in oak for a year or two. So vintage port is impenetrable, and you need 20 years of bottle to get there. Tawny port doesn't smell like oak; smells like a nectar. Right?
Yes.
If you can ever have a 20 or a 30, which Natalie, I know you have, and I've had a couple, but when I go into a wine bar, I'm like, what, $40 a glass? No thanks. But it's like nectar. And so with Pinot Noir, 16 months in oak is not to oak. The verb to oak does not exist in my vocabulary. It's to barrel age, and the oxygenation in the barrel makes things perfumed and lovely and textured. And,
Yes.
and the great wine graders of the world, and never, including yourself, because it's not doable. It's so hard to talk about texture, and I can't do it. It's like
Yes.
you can say great texture. We've learned to talk about minerality and try to differentiate it from tannins and acid, but texture, the wine has it or it doesn't. Depths of layers of flavor, we say, but I mean,
But like
texture-
velvet and silk, and try to
That's
get to
good.
that touchy feely. But I love trying to get at texture. But you're right; it's such an important thing that we miss often. I do want to get to Elaine Bruce has joined us, and Lise Giray is asking, "What is your favorite pairing for any of these Pinots? Food pairing?"
I want Natalie to go first.
Okay, well, I would love to have maybe a tender piece of veal. What else might I have? Some game birds like quail, Cornish hen. Not very imaginative.
That's very good already. I would say, so I worked, Eric Lemelson started Lemelson Vineyards, where I worked for 4 vintages out west from 99 to 2002. And he's a vegetarian, a pescatarian, and he ate a lot of wild West Coast salmon with, Pinot, which I found a pity at the time because it was but he's been a great influence in my life. And because I love wild salmon with Chardonnay, it's so good. But Pinot goes really, really well with salmon. It shouldn't be forgotten. He taught me that. With these wines open, we're going to do a salmon on the barbecue tonight because we can, because it's 16 degrees here. It's 14 in Ottawa, isn't it?
Yes,
Awesome.
it's like midsummer here.
All of a sudden. And so I would say that. And then I would have to go, people say duck and Pinot, but I would have to go with Natalie on this one. Chicken, fowl, pintade, guinea fowl, pheasant. Anytime somebody will make those things for you, you should bring them a bottle of Pinot.
Okay, there you go. Like I just find it so food friendly, just about anything. And really, I mean, if you like Pinot and that's what you want to drink, just have a bun in between if it's not going with the food. I mean, we don't need to get too caught up on perfect pairings. But there is an optimization of pleasure if you want to partake. Eric Sykes agrees duck goes well with Pinot. Beverly likes salmon and Pinot. Lori likes pork with herbs and Pinot. Lise Cheray is wondering which cheese with Pinot. You guys are hungry. It must be getting close to
They're
dinner.
making me hungry, yeah.
Yeah, well, what would you say for cheeses? Would you say a soft cheese or
I don't know. That's a tough one because for
very
me,
mouth coating?
and also the time I spent in Burgundy, worked for 3 domains over there after school, including Genot Boulanger and Marius Delarche and Pernon Vergelès. And then, of course, when I went back there for Bachelder, I watched the times change. And the Burgundians literally, when they move to their cheese, whether it's Camembert, Époisse, or very, very rarely a cheddar, but they would more likely, when they feel in a cheddar mood, go to a Comté because it's just 60 clicks away in the Jura. So a Comté or cheddar kind of cheese, although they have very different flavors, you know what? They always switch back to Chardonnay.
To white, yeah.
And
Yeah.
they love it. And I got to say that with cheese and Pinot, for me, it works so well. But watch yourself and say to yourself at a dinner party or just alone, can I really taste the Pinot the way I did now? Or is it just total pleasure?
That's
And
right.
and it depends what side you're on. Total pleasure is good too. I'm not against that. But if you paid a lot of money for a Pinot, I might be more like, let's finish it before the cheese or come to it after the cheese. Now, I would love to be educated if somebody knows how to counter that statement. But that's generally what I do to be safe. I'll move back to the unfinished Chardonnay.
Oh, absolutely. And Lori Kilmartin has a brilliant suggestion. Have you ever tried that truffle inflected cheese? We call
That
it,
sounds great.
yes, it's called Truffaut. There's probably other brand names for it. That would be a killer with Pinot Noir. But you're right, Thomas. I think, there's such a mouth coating texture, the richness, the fatness. You need a Chardonnay with good acidity. And our last talk a year ago, we were talking about that. One of the many reasons why you like to do Pinot than Chardonnay, or at least that you learned about it, was that the French would start off and they'd have their Pinots and so on with the meal. And then at the end, when the cheese plate came out, they'd go to the Chardonnay. And one more point that you brought up last year that I just want to make sure we include this year was that a lot of people feel like they have to go to whites always first and then go to reds. Whereas what they really want to do is just get to the reds. So give them the reds first. That's what they want. Then they'll relax. And then there is this interesting thing that happens after tasting reds and then going to whites. It's like you relax and your palate, I guess, I don't know if it's more open, but then you start to appreciate Chardonnay where you think you might not have liked it in the past.
That's beautiful. Well put. I have nothing to add to that. I forgot we talked about that, but yeah, one of the things I wanted to say was that was also the concept that John Sambrook, who started the Epimenian Society in Canada, taught me about the sacrificial lamb, which is, if I may especially talk about dinner parties.
Yep.
If you have, the old way of saying this would have been a great Burgundy, a Premier Cru or Grand Cru you want to show. Let's put that on its ear and say, you want to show what you think is a great Canadian Pinot. So you pull out, your Norman Hardy, or you pull out, something from Flat Rock or something from Hidden Bench, Malivoire, whoever, and now at the table, let's make it more complex. You have friends who are not convinced about Canadian wines, certainly not Canadian red wines. So what I would do in a case like that, I would get a pretty good Burgundy or Oregon or California, pretty good, not too good. So you're serving a single vineyard from Canada, $40, let's say. So now you start with a $25 wine. Do not let them finish the bottle. It's the sacrificial lamb. So they get that Pinot in their mouth, right? and then you take it away and put it on the sideboard, and now you serve the whole bottle of your top wine. So it could be Canada in this instance, but it could be Burgundy.
Okay.
And also the concept of vintage comes in.
Yep.
If you want to serve something old, don't serve the first wine being new. Don't serve it 2015 and then a 2009. Serve it 2012, then a 2009.
Okay.
And it gets harder the older it gets. But the main thing is, do not ever, in my humble opinion, serve a great wine, whether it's from Canada or elsewhere, put it cold to your people and expect them to understand it. Give them a lead up of something less good. And why I say a Bourgogne Pinot Noir or a lesser village, or, I don't want to say what village, but I'll just say that if you taste the wines before, of course, and you say, yes, this is a good progression from a Burgundy wine to a Canadian wine, or from an Oregon wine to a Canadian wine, I like this progression, half the bottle, they like it, pour it, instead of saying, never say this is the best Canadian wine ever, you must like it. You have experience with this, Natalie. It's not going to convince the doubting Thomases, excuse the expression. I think the way to do it is lead them into it, right? And the sacrificial lamb can be used with any grape type.
I love that idea, the sacrificial lamb. I've only had the concept of the decoy wine, like the wine I want people to go for if they don't know anything about wine. It's like, here, have this. But the sacrificial lamb, I like that concept even better. But you know what? It makes sense, because even when I'm tasting anything, whether just personally or professionally, your first taste of the day, your palate is not calibrated. I mean, not to get too fussy and fancy or precious about it, but that acidity hits you, that flavor hits you, and it's like, oh. And I always say, don't judge any wine on the first sip. So what we're doing is sort of conditioning their palates the way we would condition a glass, maybe roll that glass around, get the wine all coating it, and then dump it out so that we don't get any detergent smells, nothing. So we're calibrating our palate and then bringing on the wine, as you said. But I love that sacrificial lamb. Much better than my decoy wines.
Well, it's different. You're just using a wine to set up another wine to make sure it shows well. And remember to taste them both before, and remember to think about vintage, right? Two similar vintage wines. I would love to taste a Cabernet Franc if you're up for it.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that. All right, I have that here.
I think that the reason, I touched on this earlier, it's taken me years to understand this because I'm a slow learner. I'm not from here. I'm from Quebec. When I came back from Burgundy, I hoped to get the Eastern townships going on Pinot Noir. Okay. And some people are doing it, but techniques have advanced. They've got geothermal carpets and stuff. Now, whoa, that was a good one. And but then it wasn't a possibility, just like when I went to school, it was not a possibility to come to school at Brock, right? And Brock and Niagara College are doing wonderful things in churning out viticulturists. My nephew, Noah Higgins, is right now doing viticulture at Niagara College and has come from Montreal to not become a winemaker, but to make great grapes, So Niagara is really doing it now in terms of schools, but didn't exist when I was there. So what also didn't exist was Cabernet Franc. And when I first visited Niagara, people were only doing hybrids back in 87 when I visited. And a lot of wine writers are going out on a limb, and I'll test you, Natalie, and you'll have your own preferences, but most people say if we had to have 5 here, they would do Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Gamay, and Cabernet Franc. That's what they would do in Niagara. What have you thought over the years about that?
Holy
How about
smokes.
if you had 5 or 6 grape varieties? What do you think works consistently for you without dissing anybody?
No. So the ones that you mentioned, if you went quickly, but Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, Riesling,
Gamay.
Pinot Noir, Gamay, but also Chardonnay for sure.
Chardonnay, yeah, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. But the others they're either experimental and not much of a track record to go on, not consistent, not the volume, and not, so I'd be looking for that first before recommending. But those would be the 6 grapes I would go with.
Yeah. Well, what convinced me about Cabernet Franc, which we do for Catus but not for Bachelder, is that the guy who set up a Soyuz La Rose out west, he comes from Bordeaux, right, and he set up Painted Rock.
Oh, yes.
This new venture, Culmina, also set up Catus. Keyless were just friends of mine. I never thought I'd work for them. I thought I was going to move to Burgundy for my next job. Well, as it turned out, we started Bachelder and they started Keyless, and we've done both since day one. But this guy's name is Alain Sutre, Sutre. You can definitely Google him. He's one of Bordeaux's great consultants, but more on the viticulture side. And he said that the Beamsville Lincoln Lakeshore has a specific avocation for Cabernet Franc and Merlot on the blue clay soils they have there. And I only found out, and I thought, what's this consultant telling them? I knew him for years, but I mean, why is a consultant telling them to do something, the boys at Keyless, when they want to have an all Pinot domain? Their domain was patterned after the Clos Jardin. They love the Clos Jardin and they wanted to do it themselves. Well, he did it because of the soils. And for that, I got to say, if any of you out there are consultants and you get your client to do something they don't want to do, you have to wear the load if it doesn't work out, right? Mm-hmm. I would be more like, I consult too, I'd be more like, where do you want to get? Let me help you get there. He was, you will plant Cabernet Franc and Merlot here because it's like Pomerol. And when the French are like that, remember, French Canadian is not French, right? French Canadian is Québécois, and the French are the French. You talk to French Canadians about the French, it's a different deal. They have an entitlement that none of us North Americans have, but they're also very smart and they have years of tradition. Sure. And guess what? Cabernet Franc and Merlot. So this Cabernet Franc.
So it's the same soils as, or similar soils to Pomerol and blue
clay,
soils.
yeah.
What does blue clay do for this wine? Why does it work for? Because this is gorgeous. This Cab Franc.
Pomerol and Fronsac are pretty flat, and so that's right bank Bordeaux, and people forget that over in Bordeaux, it's not just, the left bank people want more Cabernet Sauvignon. It's that the right bank can't ripen it for some reason. I can't remember. We've all read this. But the point is, they ripen Merlot fantastically and Cabernet Franc. And my first year in the cellar with Keyless, I put a drop of Cabernet Franc into the Merlot, and the Merlot out of barrel. And the Merlot suddenly was so dense, suddenly came alive, and it had some aroma and perfume and some gravel. With the Cabernet Franc, you put a drop, and this is 14% Merlot, which is legal. On the label, it's Cabernet Franc, and we put 14% Merlot in. The reason being, it got really confusing having Cabernet Franc hyphen Merlot and another one that was Merlot hyphen Cabernet Franc. That means the percentage, right? The way the laws go. So if you have more than 15% of any variety, it has to be hyphenated on the label. So we keep it less than that. But I wish the laws would change. The other thing you can do, this is a great thing about marketing, you can have blended red wine. So, Keyless, Summum, or Summus, and then you do whatever the hell you want. You can call it Meritage, but Meritage is officially dead. They killed it was an ugly contraction. Yeah, they ugly contraction of heritage and merit, I think, started in the States.
For the Bordeaux blend.
With Bordeaux blend. But here in Niagara, where Cabernet Franc grows so well, just a little bit of Merlot thickens out the mid palate.
Is this anything like Shiraz and a dash of Viognier?
Yeah, it's like that. It really is like that. Okay. And in the cellar, it's what I realized slowly that Alain Sutre had done a great, great thing. He had honored the terroir at the risk of losing his job, because he hadn't seen this blue clay. Higher up the hill, it's red clay. Okay. And that's why the Clos Jardin had a vineyard called Claystone, and Moritas has a vineyard called Redstone, because those red soils, they're just slightly reddish, and the blue soils are slightly blue, and the sandy soils are slightly sandier as you get close to the lake, right? But they're all variations on a theme. But isn't this lovely?
It is gorgeous, I must say. And I'm just getting, maybe it's just tasting is subjective, but I get like this sort of violets, the blue florals.
Yeah, for sure.
Blue florals.
It is violets.
Yeah.
And that's just long barrel age. Remember, with longer barrel age and not too much oak, not too much new oak, it's all in oak, but the wine digests it and it puts out this beautiful perfume. And the Keyless tradition, reserve, so there's tradition, reserve, and Grand Reserve. And the difference here is that the Grand Reserve is a Merlot with some Cab Franc.
Okay,
so what we're going to do, we're going to taste that, or we're going to taste Chardonnay. What would you like to do?
Well,
Depends on the time. Tell me.
Yes, don't your time too. Let's do, what was the last red we have here? We have
The Merlot Grand
Merlot.
Reserve. The
Okay.
reason I picked this is because I know it's in
Yes.
Quebec right now, and I know you reach across the border, so it might be fun
Yes.
for our
Let's
Quebecois friends to check this out. Are you up
let's
for it?
do that. Absolutely. Yes, please let's do it. I'm just wading
Okay,
through the sea of
so
bottles here.
one
So,
thing, one thing. So it's the Merlot Grand Reserve, and the one thing I would like to do is, that Sideways movie.
yes.
Does everybody remember that has done us all so much
Miles.
good?
Yep.
Miles.
Yes. I'm
Those
not drinking
books.
any more frickin' Merlot.
That's right. And you know what? Here's the thing. The California Merlot he was talking about, I think, is baked and tasteless.
Ah,
But Merlot is a great grape. And I like what we said earlier, and we got some shoutbacks about truth. The truth is, here's the grapes that die in hard Niagara winters. The grape vines that die back to the ground are Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Viognier, and Syrah, and Gewürztraminer, and a few
okay.
more.
Okay.
So here's the concept. Imagine you just won the lotto and you're buying in Niagara. And I can't talk about North Shore, Lake Erie, and Prince Edward County because I don't know them, but I love them. But in Niagara, if you put something in your stable that could die back in a cold winter, you might say, what's that in my business plan for? But the answer is all those grapes, unfortunately, ripen beautifully here when it hasn't been a tough winter and have classic mid-Atlantic flavors. Like you have to question yourself whether Sauvignon Blanc, Gewürz, Viognier, Syrah, and of course Merlot from Niagara are from here or from the old world if they're done well. Now,
Mid-Atlantic meaning they have characteristics of both the old world and new
yeah,
world? Yeah.
Mid-Atlantic, not in the U.S. The U.S. has appropriated that term for several
Sure.
states, but I'm talking about not quite as far as the Azores. And the Cabernet Franc, if I could go back to it, and this is a
Yeah.
long discussion, but I would just like to touch on it, is Loire Cabernet Franc is great, and you have to get into the bell pepper there and love it, and you can also get into their great limestone terroir. But Cabernet Franc over there, they haven't done the world's best job of getting it out to the rest of the world. It's just
Okay.
like a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so people diss it for no good reason. When you go to the Loire, it's one of the loveliest wines in France. In California
Huh.
and places like that, it doesn't have a true varietal character except for the coolest sites. So I always say when you taste a Cabernet Franc, it should taste like bell pepper a bit,
A little bit.
but not in spades.
Right.
Like certain Kiwi Sauvignon Blancs takes like cat's pee and it's just a
Right.
bit, and that's
Or a little
fine.
grassy is okay, but a lot of like rev your lawnmowers.
It's not good.
No.
And so in Niagara, we have people doing massive extracted Cabernet Francs with American oak barrels that remind one of a Zinfandel. You have people doing very, very fruity style ones, but
Okay.
you have very few people doing no Cabernet Sauvignon, just Cabernet Franc and Merlot. So that first wine is, if you're a lover of right bank Bordeaux, so Fronsac, Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, its satellites, Côte de Blaye and Côte de Bourg, people don't know those wines as much as they should. And that was the first place I ever visited before going to Burgundy. So a great love for Cabernet Franc and Merlot, and their association with Cabernet Sauvignon is a different thing for a warmer climate, like left bank Bordeaux up in Pauillac and Saint-Julien and Grape. But on the other side, these wines in Canada, when you put Merlot and Cabernet Franc together, they're more like a Saint-Emilion. So I encourage your readers to check out a Saint-Emilion,
Yes.
see if they can like that
Yeah.
before they come back to Niagara Cabernet Franc.
Yeah, that would be interesting comparison. And Stephen Andrews from Waterloo, he has been chiming in. He is drinking organic wine from his hotel, the Hilton. I'm not quite sure where he is, but he's on the road traveling. He travels a lot. I think he's watching the Raptors. He must be watching a game. Anyway, but this is an extraordinary Merlot. I love it, Thomas.
Right, so this has 15% of Cabernet Franc in it. It's from 13, so it's the oldest wines we're going to taste before we go to the white wines.
Yes.
And you see that Canada is capable of delicacy. And I think we are really trying to develop a collegial atmosphere here in Canada right now. It's Canada's time. I mean, the elder Trudeau was wrong. It didn't quite happen, but for many reasons, Canada's happening now, not just wine. And I like to think like every year we all go over to London. None of us can afford it. We go to London this on the Queen's birthday. This year it's May 17th. 40 Canadian wineries on Trafalgar Square. And for those listeners who aren't Canadian or don't remember, and I certainly didn't know, growing up in Quebec, you don't hear so much about the Queen, but you do. But in Trafalgar Square with the National Gallery and Nelson's Column and the Lions, you have New Zealand House, Australia House, South Africa House, and Canada House. Last time they checked, Canada House was worth 1.5 billion or something. It's such an old building and it's 5 floors high, but it's free for Canadians to do trade missions there. So on the May 17th, there will be 40 wineries there from BC to Nova Scotia, including Quebec, doing their great wines there. And the British wine writers, we get the good ones because it saves them a trip to this big country. And we get the good ones every year. We've been 6 years in a row. And they taste stuff like this Merlot, and they just think, how is it possible? And I say, what are you shocked about? And they say, I'm not shocked that it's a good region because we've seen lots of good regions come on, New Zealand, South Africa, Oregon. They've seen them over the years, Eastern Europe. But what they're shocked at is Canada's subtlety when it's done well. It's not just powerhouse, it's subtlety, and it really is cool climate. And the world needs more of those regions, right?
Yes, and so, you said in the past too, power and complexity and so on can come in a small frame. Like,
yeah.
And I think the analogy you made the last time we talked is imagine clothing. You pay more for a silk shirt. It's delicate, it's exquisitely crafted, but it's not like, you know, the more you pay, the bigger the clothing. It's actually, you can pay for something that's small and exquisite.
That's right. And so Natalie might be wearing a lovely silk top and I might be wearing a heavy cotton roots thing. We might be both comfortable, but hers is more elegant and maybe easier to rip. My roots thing won't rip, but it's more like, it's not a croissant. Mine would be whole wheat bread. But, you know, both things are important in life, right?
Absolutely.
But,
all right, let's move on to the Chardonnay then.
What do you want to taste?
Okay. What would you point out? I've got 4 of your whites here, 4 of your Chardonnays.
Well, I would say I would do the audacious thing I've never done, so let's do it on this show.
Okay.
Let's finish with the Caylus, because that puts it in the cleanup position.
Okay.
And that's a tough position for it because of where it's located, but I think we'll understand, and hopefully people will try this.
Okay.
Of mine, do you want to try just, I don't know if you're running just the 213s, or do you want to do the 12 and the 213s?
Up to you. I'm fine either way. I've got them all here. Let's see.
Okay, well, let's do the 12 from Saunders Vineyard. This is in Beamsville. One thing I should say is that, you know, people should come and visit Niagara because they would see things like let's say you go to Burgundy and you say, oh, I just can't remember the Burgundian villages. Why do these people, they all know so much, and how come I can't learn them? Well, the first time you get in a car or a train or a bicycle from Dijon and you go south past these mythical villages and you see, you know, Gevrey-Chambertin, Maurice-Saint-Denis, Chambon-Musigny, Clos de Vougeot, sitting up there in the fields, you don't forget it. And if you actually make the effort to come to Niagara, like we want you to drink Niagara, but if you make the effort to come here and you see Grimsby, Beamsville, Vineland, Jordan on a bench, much like in Burgundy, perhaps not quite as pretty as the oldest buildings, but the point is that you will remember by seeing, and you will truly see that Beamsville, you can almost throw, you know, an Olympic athlete could throw a very long ball and hit the lake. So Beamsville is at once, whatever you think of Niagara on the lake, Beamsville is the same thing except on a bench. It's so close to the lake, and yet it's a bench. And I want to show you something here. I'm going to test this in 2 glasses. This is, as most of you probably know if you're wine geeks and watching this program, so that's the Montrachet glass, the big wide one. And this is, some people also call it Montrachet glass. And when I get a good Chard, I'll often pour it in both. One of these will maximize the aroma, and the other one will make it seem more tight. So often I use this Riedel glass I forget the exact name. It's not called Chablis and it's not called Montrachet, but this glass that's kind of short and stumpy,
Yes.
and it tends to tighten up New World wines
Do you
and
want
make them
them
seem a
tightened
little
up?
bit more like a Prud'homme. And this takes a great older wine, just makes it wow. Anyway, so this Saunders is very close. You can tell which one I'm doing today.
Yes.
This Saunders is very close to the lake and organically grown by the Saunders family, who Warren Saunders is now 92, and he was born here to a Jamaican family and was for a long time, and maybe still now, the only Jamaican derivative family on the bench. Grew up in the Hamilton steel mills and bought a farm. And Bepi Crozarial from the Globe wrote a great story on Saunders. I don't know if that's still available online, but this is one of Canada's unsung pioneers. Unsung because they never did a winery. So wineries get you notice. You can grow good grapes, but wineries get you notice. So this Saunders has always a honeyed characteristic to it. Do you get that, Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely. This is just gorgeous. It is beautiful. Little beeswax and toasted almond. I'm loving it. And Sam Huck from BC says it's time to make the trip to Ontario wine country. He teaches wine courses in BC, in Vancouver. Elaine Bruce, who's a sommelier in Calgary, loving all these wine tips. I need to become an intern. Lise Charest-Gagné wants to visit your winery. So this is just gorgeous. Wow.
So one of the great things about what we're saying here is because these guys are super geeks, I wouldn't, do this stuff on the show. So this cork here is called a Diam cork. Wait a second, I got to watch the little thing.
Yes.
And what it is a composite cork. So composite corks are at once the cheapest and some of the most expensive kind of corks. This has been tested for years.
Okay.
Some of the great Burgundians are using this in some of their $100 bottles. And what it is cork blown apart so it won't have any TCA or corkiness, and then put back together. And what happens is there's zero corkiness and great freshness. We just had a 6-year-old Chardonnay from Niagara, and it was just going a bit towards almondiness, but really fresh still,
Oh, yeah. It's super fresh. Nice and crisp, but it's got it all.
When people ask me, do you prefer Stelvin, screw cap wines or cork? I deflect it. I always say, you know what I want? This is considered the grower bottle with that kind of, let me watch this here. This little chamfer thing here.
Yes.
And the thicker top, because the Burgundian growers are stocky. And this grower's bottle is what I want. And what I put in it must not harm the wine. So Diam, I've been using since 11, and my wines are aging at the same rate as cork with no corkiness. And when you see a composite cork in a high-end wine, not a gross composite cork that looks like a cork board, but a fine one like this that is very, very small particles, that is usually an indication of great quality and somebody who is sick to death of corkiness and want to. Yeah, you have Richebourg Grand Crus at $400 under Diam right now. So that's just a little aside, and that's only because of the kind of questions we're getting. I know these guys and gals can take it.
Absolutely, and a lot
Saunders.
of them are heading there. Yep, the 13 Saunders. Let's do that. All right.
Here we go.
Oh, I don't want to pour that.
So 1 year younger.
Okay.
Your kids drink wine.
No, I exposed my son early to wine, and I made sure it wasn't a sweet wine. And so he thinks it's totally yuck. So it was bitter, and I did it deliberately.
Same with us, though. I mean, the girls like wine that's 6 and 8 years old, and now they're 18 and 19 and 21, and they tolerate wine, but when they go with friends, they still want those drinks with the little umbrellas in them. That's okay. But they're not drinking coolers.
No.
So isn't that lovely? You see how 1 year, 12 was a hot year, well preserved. This is 13, a cool year, obviously looking very mineral.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
So there we go.
Absolutely. Okay. Let us do the last two then, because
Oregon.
you get the record for the time here, and I know you're going to be going to a barbecue, having food soon.
So this is a Oregon Johnson Vineyard, again
Okay.
planted. I drove the ripper on this property to rip the ground back in 2000, and Eric Lemelson planted it. And this is a fabulous piece of a plot in Oregon. And I know the viewers, Bachelder doesn't have a tasting room, so we can't yet. We'll have one soon. You have to have 5 acres of land, and we're too poor for that. But, by the way, micro négoce in Burgundy is considered a very noble thing. The first kid in the family gets the land. The second kid has to buy grapes if they want to be in the wine business. And that's the way it goes because nobody can afford land anymore.
Huh.
So they're the ones who turned me on to the concept of buying grapes, not wine, but buying grapes. And so anyway, I started to buy when I worked at Lemelson Vineyards after I started Bachelder, after the closure down, I started to buy Johnson Vineyard, even though I had helped plant this. And I got to tell you, the fact that Oregon has 0 limestone does not mean it has 0 minerality. And why I was talking about a tasting room was because I can't get these wines to people direct. Lifford is our distributor, and they bring them in. And in Quebec, it's Céleste Levieux. But what they can do is go to the LCB or the SAQ or wherever they live and go to their product consultant or read Natalie's site and say, I want a fine Oregon Chardonnay. And I do mean fine, because fine is always never over oak, never sweet, right?
Right.
And when you do that, even right after a Niagara, which is the worst position to put this, because Niagara wines just sort of, they sparkle with the limestone minerality. This has sedimentary stone minerality, which is not a bright minerality, but it almost has a salty sea tang, because the sedimentary rock used to be under the sea, and when the mountains came up, right? So that's how the Willamette Valley was formed.
Wow. But they're heavier soils in the Oregon region? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
but they don't get much rain.
Dense. Okay.
Dense and lots of sun, Western sunset. So I try to put this in a way that makes sense for everybody. Wine is often measured its acidic content in pH and acidity, total acidity. Mm-hmm. Without getting too heavy, I'll just say that you can have the same acidity in Burgundy, Niagara, and Oregon will see no more fat wines. Okay. So I select the best barrels and the most tightest looking barrels out of this. It doesn't quite have the pop of Niagara, but it certainly is savory and lovely. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes. It's gorgeous. I mean, I can see the signature with all of these wines, even though they're in the different regions, which I know is what you're trying to achieve. Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Definitely.
So it's like, well, we both brought up kids along with our partners. I'm looking for my corkscrew, sorry. We both brought up kids, and we know that when you start bringing up kids, you think, and for those of you who haven't had kids, don't start. There's still time not to start. No, seriously. For those of you who haven't had kids, always think about the way you were brought up and know that parents, young parents, because you're de facto young when you start, you think, I am not going to make this mistake with my kids. Here's what I'm going to do. And it's all this I stuff. The minute you have a kid, you realize it's them. And you're stewarding them, right? And it's, and it's not noble or anything. It's the only way to do it. You can't apply the same technique of raising kids to 2 separate kids, because one will resist this, the other one will resist something else. The other one will pretend to go along, but ultimately resist. And so I'm going to move because the sun just changed here.
Sure, absolutely.
Give me a second here. Give me a second.
No worries.
And so what happened is that with winemaking, yes, I do exactly the same thing in Oregon, Burgundy, and Niagara. Same barrel, same technique, same head, but same hands, as you said earlier. But ultimately, the kids don't listen to me all the time. So it's not like, oh, I'll chaptalize everything. So everything, Oregon doesn't need chaptalization. It's 13.5. Niagara needed a bit. Burgundy needed, no. We let them be, and we try to get them all through high school and university. Yes. And if they don't go to university, that's okay. If they want to be an artist, it's okay, right?
And Mario De Rosa says, congratulations, it's triplets. Isn't that
Well,
great?
yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned his name because we've known each other for a long time, and he's
Ah,
one of the great, Ontario wine lovers. Follows everybody and knows and writes on wine and knows a lot of people. And Mario is of the generation, like hopefully many listening to us, where they grow up in a time where you say, do you know these kids today, right? And I mean these kids today. I'm not a kid. I'd love to say I'm a kid. So when you say to people who are in 905, which we are here, but 905 north of Toronto, and you say to them, hey, have you heard of Romany Conti? They go, nope. Have you heard of Norman Hardy? Yep. And that is the future, that people grow up here actually believing that good things come from here, not just tomatoes, but wine. But, and so local chefs in Niagara, man, I love olive oil. But Michael Olson, I saw him the other day, he said, man, you got to go to Ontario's best canola, cold pressed canola. It has a total terroir of its own, and it's great with food. And I'm like, wow, like everything's happening here. It's happening fast, and people are starting to believe that you don't have to go to the States, get known, and come back here. That actually the new generation is actually going to believe if their parents say Ontario wine shit, they're going to go blah, blah, blah. But in some cases, we have so many new Canadians, which is part of the great strength of our country. They will actually believe I am deciding that Norman Hardy is good. I just use him because he's a buddy and he's a pioneer out in Prince Edward County and in Niagara. He's an easy one to point to. And you know what? I just believe that these kids, if they find something, and I can mention 25 other names, if they find something that's local and good, they shouldn't only eat the 100-mile diet. They should drink the 100-mile diet, right?
absolutely. Love all those points there. No more Shania Twain, Celine Dion, validation from the US. And I like the sort of almost backlash. We will decide for ourselves. Ontario's good. All right, the Kalis.
This is the toughest wine of the tasting. This is
All
a
right.
great wine. So for those of you who know your Burgundies, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. And if you don't, I'll just give you some villages to Google later. So the classic Côte de Beaune villages are Corton-Charlemagne in Alice-Corton,
Okay.
Beaune, Meursault, Chassagne-Montrachet, and Pouligny-Montrachet.
Okay.
Then 2 hours to the south, they make fabulous wines in the Mâconnais, but the Grand Crus there are Puy-Fusset and Saint-Véran. And
All right.
so if you were sitting in Burgundy and you would dare to pour a Puy-Fusset, which is a great wine, costs 30 or 40 bucks a bottle, after $100 Meursault, people would say, what are you smoking? Why are you doing that? Well, I'm doing that right now because this Caylus comes from the Lincoln Lakeshore. So it's on sandy soils near the lake. It's not on the bench, but it has a typicity that's all its own. And I think the first people to do Lincoln Lakeshore were probably Creekside, and then Francois Morissette, a good buddy of mine who's been here since about 2008, has been doing a lot of Lincoln Lakeshore. The bench is the finest, maybe, just like the Premier Cruise of Burgundy. But Lincoln Lakeshore has a thing all its own, and the other one like that is Creek Shores. Creek Shores are in Jordan. Lincoln Lakeshores are in Beamsville. And these are on the flat, but guess what? Nothing in Niagara's on the flat because everything eventually has to go to the lake, right? Mm-hmm. So this has a more plush feel to it always. So the best way to pour this, Natalie, would be to do it first. But I put it after our Premier Cruise because I wanted to show you that different is still good,
All right. Totally different.
Yeah. But so lovely. And that's the first time, because I thought we should do something edgy on Earth Day. That's the first time I do Puy-Fusset after the Greats of Beaune. Put another way, Lincoln Lakeshore after Niagara Bench. And it stands up. It's just different.
Yeah, I love the parallels you're drawing here. It's great. It does stand up. It does not suffer by comparison. It stands as its own signature.
I would love to know if anybody else is asking questions, because that's my favorite part of the show.
Okay. And we are like at what is it? The hour and 20 minutes. Oh my goodness. We've never gone this long. Tribute to you, but we will wrap up, Thomas. Mario DeRosa is just saying he's drinking the 2012 Bachelder Burgundy Chardonnay tonight. All right.
Wow.
So, and there's been more questions, but I think what we'll do, Thomas, in respect for your time, we'll wrap this up. Is there anything you want to mention before we do that? Is there anything we've left out? Because folks, you can keep on posting questions below all through the week. Watch the replay, post the questions. Please take a moment to share this video so that others find out about it. I appreciate the 28 of you who have already shared this, and I will be announcing a winner from last week at the end of this session. So, Thomas, anything else you'd like to say?
I would say I want to honor Earth Day. I would say, first of all, I've been trying to remember this the whole time. We're going to send a couple of bottles of Bachelder and a couple of bottles of Cadas for next week's prize. So maybe you want to do
great.
a couple of draws.
Absolutely. Well, so more than one winner, folks. Yes, I've been kind of keeping it generic. But yes,
so
now that you say that. Okay.
Let's do that, and we'll make sure it's good stuff. And I would say the other thing is, I really, really want to say that organic wine always tastes better, but there's such this crosshatch these days of natural wines, organic wines. It used to be when I looked at the organic wine section at the LCBO and the SAQ and in the States, I would go, I love the intent, but I'm going to go get something classic. That was 20 years ago. Now I go to the organic wine section. I know it's going to be good. I can't assure you that it will be better. And all I can encourage people is the fact that I've chosen, and I will continue to choose to go down the organic route. I want to make and I want to drink classic wines that represent their terroirs. That's what I like. And if it can be organic, so much the better. And I think we should all try to keep our wine hats on and our wine-loving hats on, and not only the organic. We shouldn't drink bad organic wine, and we shouldn't drink bad conventional wine. We should push the conventional people towards organics and try to continue them. So I think you can go out there and buy organic wines and encourage those producers. For sure, do it. But also buy wines that encourage your love of wine. And I mean, like you, Natalie, it's like a disease with you. You start loving wine and you just can't stop. And I'm the same way. And you just have to quantify and try to figure out wine is unquantifiable. Don't only keep it to organic wines, but really do keep it to great terroirs, though. Keep it to great terroirs, whether organic or not. And ask those hard questions when you visit producers in France, in Niagara. Couldn't you do at least one block organic? Help the movement along, right? But it's a complex world. Everything exists at the same time, right? There's hip hop now, but reggae music still exists. We have to keep it all going because we like this big complex world. And I defend my right to drink Barolo and Burgundy and Chianti, even though I love the 100-mile diet, right? So, there you go.
Well said. Defend your rights. Yes, I will drink to that, Thomas. I'll drink to you as well. So I'll raise a glass to you of your wine. I appreciate your time, your energy, your passion here tonight, but also what you do all of the other days of the year. So thank you for spending your evening with us, Thomas, and I wish you all the best. All right.
Thanks for getting all the word out there. Cheers.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Okay, folks, stay with me here because I am going to announce the winner from last week's contest. That's really exciting that Thomas has decided to give us a couple of bottles of Calis and a couple of bottles of Bachelder wines. So we're going to have two winners next week. It's really worth sharing and commenting. Woohoo! Okay, just a few things then. So I'm sure you all know where the share button is. There you go, and you can comment. You can say why you like the video, and if you're watching the replay, you still do have that chance to win one of these 4 wines next week that we'll announce. You can click on follow and like. Best of the best interview, says Beverly. Excellent. Elaine Bruce, wow, thank you. Francis, cheers to you both. All right, and you can always get my 5 tips on how to become a wine expert just at nataliemclean.com/expert if you would like to get that. It's a free PDF. In a moment, I will announce the winner of last week's contest. Next week's guest is Dan Speck of Henry of Pelham Winery. It's the three Speck brothers, another great wine story and storyteller. Take a moment to post what you learned or what the most interesting point was tonight in the comments below. You can always connect with me. These URLs they default to the social media outlet. I've made it easier to remember. And of course, those of you who are in my Get Wine Smart course, we have a tasting at 7 p.m., which was like 24 minutes ago. Actually, I'm going to take 5-10 minute break right now, and then I'm going to hop over into our course members Facebook group, which is the URL's right down there at the bottom, facebook.com/groups, Get Wine Smart. And we are going to do a tasting of Sauvignon Blanc wines in preparation for Sauvignon Blanc Day, May 4th. All right. So now, where is my little noisemaker here? So the winner of last week's contest, do I have it here? Okay. There we go. All right. So many good comments still coming in. I'm delaying the answer. Yes, the winner. Paul, Colleen Kilty, a mesmerizing session. Christian Marcoux, a great show. Beverly, best of the best interviews. All righty. So the winner of last week's contest, if you will, is Lise Cheret-Gagné. Yay, Lise! Woohoo! All right. So, Lise, I'm going to connect you with the contact to get your Alamos wines. They are coming to you. So, folks, you can still qualify for next week's winner. And there's going to be 2 prizes next week. Mark Lay, Paul Speck Sr. was my English teacher. That is amazing. Kimberly Inkstatter. You're welcome, Kimberly. Cheers from Jamaica. I love when you guys chime in when you're on the road, whether it's for business or personal pleasure, whatever's going on. Oh, big happy face from Lise. Congrats from Beverly. Okay, guys, this is fantastic. Stephen Andrews, Mark Lay. All right, you guys are so collegial. I love this happy group. We gather every week. So I will see you next Sunday at 6 p.m. This is all extra long session, but I just couldn't help myself because I know Thomas is such a good storyteller. So I will see you next Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern, Toronto, New York time, with Dan Speck of Henry of Pelham Winery. We're going to have a great chat about how family-run wineries are different from others, from those that are not. All right. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. I will see you if you are part of the Get Wine Smart course. I'll see you over in the private Facebook group in about 5-10 minutes. All right. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.